You can run, but you cannot hide regulations in short-term rentals. It's a real thing. No matter how much you don't want it to happen, it's going to happen. And it's probably something that you're going to need to prepare for. And that's what we're talking to Lukas Krause today about on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. You're listening to me, Kyle Stanley, and we have Lukas Krause with SkyRun on the podcast today. Really great conversation here, especially, I'm in California and we're always wondering when are regulations going to trickle down into our market, which is Central California. There's lots of regulations in Northern California, lots of regulations in Southern California, but there's always the question of when is that going to actually get absorbed into Central California. And so for that reason, this idea of regulations and talking about how we're getting really targeted as a short-term rental industry as being a problem in affordable housing is just really not the truth when you actually look at the numbers. But at the same time, no matter what the truth is or not, the reality is that this is going to be something that we all have to deal with. So rather than complain about it, why don't we start to say, well, what can we do to get out in front of it? And that's exactly what we had as a discussion here with Lukas, who's got a really vast background in a lot of different businesses, a lot of different real estate. And this guy has his stuff together now working with SkyRun, which we'll talk a little bit more about as well. So without further ado, let's get to it right now with Lukas Krause on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. We've got Lukas Krause here today. And Lukas, I'm excited about this conversation we're going to have. And the timing could not be better as we are getting impacted in California with some things that are going to be a fun thing to talk about with you today. And Lukas, before we get started, just want to thank you for being on here, brother.
Oh, thanks. Excited to participate.
Awesome. Well, hey, usually we ask what's your craziest short-term rental story, but you're very much on the, admin side of the company SkyRun that you're working with. And so I want to instead, because you've got a big background in investment, what's like the best investment that you've had in your investing career?
I'll have to say it was my first home. That really started everything off on such a positive trajectory. My mid 20s, it was a very modest condo in downtown Denver. It was an old building. But I bought it intentionally to be a rental in the long run after I moved out, and owned it for probably about 7 years afterwards, and then sold it. And, I say great fortune because it was a great return. And it's the reason I, could afford to buy a house in Park City, Utah. Turned it into the down payment for that.
I was going to say, Denver, man, like back in the day was one of the most affordable places to live. And then suddenly overnight became one of the most unaffordable places. So if you bought it at the low and sold at the high, then you did pretty well.
Yes. No, good fortune. I like to say I'm smart, but sometimes it helps to be very lucky.
I'd rather be lucky than good. That's for sure. All right, Lukas, you've got a very interesting path, and I really want people to hear this today. And a lot of commonalities, honestly, with my path as well, that I think we're going to have some fun talking about. So just bring people back. What were you doing? Take us back to, right out of school, Lukas, and where he was at, what struggles you went through, and then what brought you into the short-term rental world. If you can give us that windy path.
Sure. I try not to put everyone to sleep with my boring background, but yeah, I graduated after September 11th. So everyone knows pretty down economy. After I graduated from Indiana University, worked for AT&T, and it was a massive company, and you could do great work there and no one noticed, and you could do terrible work and no one noticed. And I knew that probably wasn't the environment for me. And I spent about 2 years there, but one of the things I was doing, I had this dream of playing professional baseball. And so during that time, I was reinventing myself as a pitcher, and I didn't really play in college. And so I ended up, lining up a workout with the New York Mets. And after 2 years of really grinding, I got signed by the Mets. So I took a little career detour, not an illustrious career, got injured pretty quick. And it's a much boring story I could bore the rest of the viewers with. But when I re-entered the workforce,
baseball is never boring, brother. Not for me.
I re-entered the workforce and worked for the Capital Group that owned Quiznos. And that's the first time I got into franchising, and just fell in love with supporting individuals who had that entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to start their own business and were looking for a vehicle to do that. And kind of wore every hat there. Led an onboarding process, led a team for turnaround for underperforming markets and restaurants, led operations for the coach and teach side for the east half of the country, and ultimately ran the international brand. Did that for about 6 years and got the itch to start my own business, and did that. And I had a really great experience, but I will tell you that made me such a better leader and supporter of those who were starting businesses, because you can coach and read every textbook, right? And know what to do, but unless you've lived it, you don't really appreciate the financial, not only the financial stakes, but the emotional stakes when it's your money and it comes out of your account.
Yep.
So did that for a few years, and then got into this whole world of real estate in like 2011 for a group called Real Property Management. And it was kind of a turnaround situation. They were managing a few thousand homes. And we kind of had to retool the organization to really build it for scale. And, after kind of the housing crisis, or kind of the financial crisis, everyone was looking to rent out the homes they couldn't sell. And so it was the right time, right place. And we really did tap into that opportunity and built the largest single family property manager in the country, managing over 65,000 homes. So
that's not a small feat, man.
It was a
really
wild ride.
Yeah. And really quick, before you even transition into how you got into short-term rentals, I'm just curious. So what did you study in college?
I did undergrad was in marketing. I started off in finance, or in physical therapy, and realized I didn't like science classes that much. So got into marketing, and I've really had no marketing jobs ever since I graduated.
And you could say, the transition into business is kind of a vertical, or not a vertical, a parallel move from marketing, but still like no business background. So my next question, like, you went from AT&T to trying to get back into being a professional baseball player, and then helping, you said one of the key things that you really liked about being with Quiznos was helping entrepreneurs succeed. So was there any moment in that where you were like, well, I haven't even been an entrepreneur yet. How am I helping these people?
Yeah, the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure.
I think fortunately it was just, studying. I did get my MBA during that window, and I took so much more out of that experience because I was actually able to practically apply it, where undergrad, you're studying for a test and you don't actually get to use it.
Sure. Yep.
But no, I do think there was a lot of learning. I mean, to me, you can learn from everyone, every situation. And that was an organization that had a lot of talent and resources. And I did a lot of rotational internships in my college experience and had a good basis. I think I did a good job, and I cared and was committed. But, after doing it myself and really going through it, I'm far better equipped to help that small business owner than I was at that initial time in the business.
Yeah, no, very cool. And then you started your own business. What was that?
So that was in the tax credit space. So we help, we're kind of advisory for investments in whether it be renewable energy, tax credits that come from that, historic rehabs, film credits, you name it. So it's really more of a kind of advisory service, and that company's still around. Team does a really good job of managing that.
Okay. So, and you still are owner in it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So, well, that's super unique, because you start a business. It sounds like it's gone well enough to be able to still be around today, but then you kind of make this transition into real estate with a major real estate property management company. A lot of people might wonder, like, well, why not just stick with the business that you created? So what was that choice that you made to go from, hey, I'm a successful entrepreneur, have my own business, to now I want to go work for someone else?
I think the market potential and really what it was, it's a very niche industry and small. So there wasn't that potential, and the value I was able to add was probably the highest and best use of time. And so I had the itch to do something and play on a bigger stage. And, I looked at the landscape in the property management, and we had a chance to change an industry and really make our imprint on it. And that was kind of sexy. And that's a draw. And so that was kind of what the leap was. And so you're right. You do lose the freedom of, working for someone, but, if you structure it correctly and hired gun, you can do some things. And so I do miss elements of complete autonomy and freedom of your own business, but it does help where you're sharing some of the risk when you're working for someone else.
Well, you were attracted to a vision, right? Like that's pretty cool. What was you said, being able to impact an industry, what was the main thing that you were attracted to or ended up doing to help impact the industry?
Yeah. So early to, I'd say 2008 to 2010 window, the property management space was really growing because of all the individuals not able to sell their homes, all those REOs and
Right,
things.
right.
And so people are looking for professional property managers, and there's very low barriers to entry.
Mm.
And the standard was very unacceptable for those investors in general. Now, I'm not saying there weren't really strong property managers, but they were more the outliers. And so, it was kind of our mission to not only grow, but make an imprint. We were very involved in NARPM, which is the National Association of Residential Property Managers. We helped build the certification program, did a lot of education, and really tried to help and be active even from the advocacy side of how do we raise the standards. And so that those individuals who, it could be their biggest investment in their home, have peace of mind that there's someone reputable taking care of that and managing it. Now, did we completely, change that and eradicate any of the underperformers? No. But I do think we made a big imprint on that space. And just by growing and creating a larger space of competitors that are more sophisticated, really did help raise that standard. And I think it's a better product today because of that.
That's awesome, man. All right. So what happened next to get you into short-term rentals?
Yeah, short-term rentals. So we got that business sold. One of the co-founders had a tiny bit of a health scare and was kind of motivated to sell the business off, based on that. And it was one of those where peeking head up and really finding that interesting challenge. And the short-term space kind of has a lot of the hallmarks that I saw in the long term. Fragmented, huge opportunity, a lot of investment in technology, and a chance for us to again hopefully raise the standards, because similarly people have made these investments in these homes, and there are a lot of quality managers out there, but there's also individuals who aren't as effective at this, and want to make sure that we're taking care of it, and we're also managing, as we'll get into the regulatory environment, we're not being unreasonably regulated because of maybe a few bad actors, not to be dramatic, but individuals who might not be managing them correctly.
Yeah. And I want to sit there for a second, right? Because there's two things that I think of when I hear about bad managers. One is the person who just, hey, I just want to try this out, and they put their place on Airbnb, and they don't know how to put up photos. They don't know how to talk to guests. They don't know how to pre-screen guests. And before you know it, like every weekend, you're getting calls from the neighbors saying there's a party every single weekend, which of course puts a bad name on it. And by the way, I was one of those people in the beginning. I actually got a call from a neighbor saying, hey, whoever's managing your property sucks. You should fire them. And I said, well, that's going to be difficult because that's me. So I knew at that point, like, man, I'm really hurting a neighborhood. I need to figure out some things. So that kicked me into gear. But then the second thing is, like one of the places that we manage is Bass Lake, California. And a lot of these management companies in that area don't even use OTAs. They don't use Airbnb. They don't use VRBO. They just rely on their own direct booking website, which is archaic. And all of these owners that put their trust in these companies are like, hey, I can't even get anyone on the phone, and I don't even know if my property is getting booked. And but they're forced to use these people because there's no one else in the area. So just I know I kind of vomited some information there, but that's what I think of when I hear bad managers. What are some other things for you to add to that, or are we on the same page on that?
Oh, I think we're on the same page. I think there's a few, right? I mean, some individuals are just shooting themselves in the foot because they're not taking advantage of the tools and resources that are available. So they're not generating the income on those homes that is potential, like leveraging the OTAs or optimizing on those channels.
Yeah.
And really leveraging that. And some of the things when it comes to pricing, it's getting more and more sophisticated.
100%.
And given all of the investment in the industry, there are a lot of great viable options, which have brought the price down. So that's accessible to more people. And so if you're not investing, in, pricing tools and doing that, you're going to get left on the side of the road there, because more and more people are accessing that and doing that regularly. And then you hit kind of this. So I think there's the operational and just maybe opportunity cost when I say, not bad performer. The other is, like you said, it's not managing it effectively, not understanding you're a party house because you have a short length of stay, or you let something book a couple days out. And I don't think it's intentional. I think individuals are going through the growing pains of learning, But then the other situation is sometimes people get out over their skis and grow faster than they can, and they're not able to staff or support and provide really that great experience they were initially, because they had that attention to detail. And now they're understaffed, and guess what happens? They're providing, less than stellar experiences for their guests and not delivering for their homeowners, because the ratings are going down on the property, and it's not having the prominence it should on the OTAs.
So, my next question to that is, with SkyRun, you guys are managing what, about, you said 1,200 properties?
Yeah, almost 1,200 properties today.
So that's a lot of properties. I'm at 55, and I think to myself, like, hey, just even going into another market, right? How many markets are you guys in?
35.
Yeah. So going to another market, for me, I look at that and it's like, hey, that's like a 6-month process of getting the relationships, getting the handymen, getting the cleaners, and really finding reliable boots on the ground to keep the quality up. And for that reason, that's been a big reason why I've kind of struggled to think about moving into new markets. So you talked a lot about quality. How is it that you guys at SkyRun have been able to keep quality high while going into so many different new markets?
Yeah, I think you hit the key piece there. We say it's low barriers to entry, but it's a big lift to launch in a new market. You need to have local boots on the ground, be part of the community, vested in it, not only to support, but just from a business development, to add new homes and network with realtors, to just be able to do that. So, the key is local ownership, local boots on the ground. This is not a business where you can centralize a ton and have this hub and spoke strategy. It just doesn't. And so where our focus is, one of kind of our strategic pillars is build the best operators in the industry. And so we invest heavily on, finding local operators who will, own the market and the operations and control that quality, but train them, give them tools. We have our own proprietary software, and we augment that with some off-the-shelf elements. But we make material investment in the training and build a community. All of our, location owners are sharing information, best practices. We provide feedback loops on guest reviews. And you guys, you've been around this, it. Like, it's a virtuous cycle. If you can get the guest service piece correct, you get repeat bookings, you get people coming back, direct bookings from you. And so that's one of kind of our hallmarks, is not only having great training and support, but it's making sure we get that guest experience right. As a system average with, what we've had over 600,000 previous guests, our system average is just about 4.8 stars.
Nice.
And so, you've done it, and how hard that is to do when you don't control exactly the inventory completely, when you're third party managing. That guest experience is really, I feel like, foundational to our success.
Now, these operators that you're talking about, are they employees, or it almost sounded like a franchise model?
It is a franchise. Yes.
Okay. Nice. Okay. So they buy in, what is a, franchisee, and, I know that's not part of the conversation that we were necessarily talking about with regulations, but now you've got me curious, just on what SkyRun's business model looks like.
Yeah. So like initial, investment, or are you looking just what the ramp up period, what would be?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm someone who says, hey, I'm interested in operating in this area, what exactly am I getting from you guys? Am I getting leads, or am I only getting like the training on how to do the business?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like any franchise concept, whether it be a restaurant you bought into. You get all of your website, your marketing collateral, and all of the support. And we have it's 3 phases of training, but it's short-term rental management 101. It's then on the job training, working in one of our locations, get that. Then you get 12-week revenue management training, 12-week business development training. Cool. And then you have access to all of collateral. So we have templates for everything, for presentations. And you have a dedicated onboarding specialist, someone who's operated, these businesses at scale and done it and lived this, one of our own former franchisees, and an individual who would operate one of our locations as our trainers. And they're there kind of working with you weekly to get you ramped up. And so, everyone that talks about kind of the franchise model, but here's kind of a simple way. Franchising, it's really to get you as quick to viability as quick as possible and manage out risk. And you do that in exchange for a royalty. And, we hope that we save you a lot of mistakes because you have a proven model and support resources. And then, if you do it on your own, you got to go through all of the learning curve and build everything.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of our whole model, is that training,
Cool.
support, marketing, collateral. And then on the last piece, as I mentioned, we have our own proprietary backend property management software that has revenue management built into it. So
that's awesome.
We really do try to provide a turnkey solution for those who are coming into the space. And the usual profile of someone who comes from our franchise is someone kind of leaving corporate America, maybe wants to start their own business, but they've always kind of worked for someone. And it's a nice way of having guide rails and support, and gives them a much higher likelihood of success.
That's awesome.
Especially because they usually don't come with experience in the short-term rental space.
Very cool. Okay. So we know that you guys have a vast portfolio within the entire 35 markets, 1,200 properties. Since we want to talk about regulations today, and I think this is going to be a really cool conversation to have, what's one market or one story from one market that you can say has been like, this is a struggle for us right now, and we're having to battle it, or maybe even a story of a battle that happened and you guys were able to come out on top and fight, the city on the regulations, anything like that?
Yeah, I feel like we're in the early stages of this, as our industry as a whole. So it's the infancy of what regulations, and I do believe regulations should be in place. I do think it should benefit all of us, but they should be thoughtfully done. And I don't think put I'll say unnecessary and ill-conceived constraints on our space.
Yep.
So, of our 35 plus locations, I mean, it's all but a couple are dealing with some form of it in one shape or form. I'll single out kind of, in Summit County, Colorado, we have, a pretty large footprint, number of locations. And so there's layers of regulations there. In the town of Breckenridge, they did put a hard cap, which was almost like half of what the available licenses were. Wow. And so, that obviously impaired generating leads from home sales as people turn over or are trying to buy a home, because you're going to maybe wait 10 years, 15 years before, if you put your name in for a license, that you would get it. The other was, they imposed kind of a nuisance component where you have to answer the phone live with, 24/7 and have three strikes and kind of you're out. And so for us, I'd say the nuisance piece was not a big deal. We're kind of have round the clock support, maybe modified some things on how we approached it. I think the thing we were really cautious of, as you guys very much well know, our industry, there's a little bit of neighbors who are maybe look at the property and go, I'm jealous, you're making money on this. And so we have seen nuisance complaints that are not viable, and they're just neighbors who are calling to complain because they want to try to get you to 3 strikes. And so working with the local municipalities to help, and they've been reasonable around some of those components. But that hard cap is one where you have to look at your business development a little differently, how you're attacking it. Realtors are a very viable channel, but working with individuals who maybe are managing it themselves and get tired of it become a much more viable channel because they already have the license. And so how do we make this more attractive to use third-party management? The way I look at it is, again, we have to play the hand we're dealt, but we've been very active, and we're continue to be very active and help reshaping that environment. But, there are positives that come out, even though I don't think that's the right regulation and how it's restricted us.
Right.
Restricting supply does increase, the demand, right? Or it doesn't increase the demand, but it increases the value in the nightly rate.
Absolutely.
So there are positives. And so you have to make the most of it. But I'd say that's one of the probably the more prevalent ones we work through. We're very active in advocating in other places and trying to shape it. But hopefully we will, be able to influence it, because BREC did raise their cap a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so we did see a little easing as the group has been very, the association has been very active, and we're hopeful to, to gain some more ground as people are realizing maybe these regulations haven't had the impact they thought they were.
So the example that you use is actually kind of surprising to me, because I think about a place like Denver that has a lot of regulations, or like Atlanta, for example, that put a cap on, you can only have 2 under your name per owner. And that kind of makes sense to me. It's metro, right? There's a lot of opportunity for business for hotels. So that kind of, to me, is like, okay, I can see like the hotels kind of lobbying against. Whereas like Breckenridge, it's like, yeah, there's hotels, but also most of these homes are second homes that people own. And a lot of the economy in Breckenridge is driven by travel.
Mhm.
So do you have any insight on why a town like Breckenridge would be making such a vast or such an intense move like that?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's very similar to what you're seeing in urban. And your observation is correct. I do agree with, right. In urban populations, a different dynamic, but it's all about affordability,
Mm,
and especially in these resort areas, workforce housing is a big challenge. And there's a number of factors that have caused this. For over a decade plus after the kind of the financial crisis, new construction fell off a cliff. We're over 3 million homes short of where we need to be.
mm,
And so you have that. And then you throw this COVID piece, which allows people to work from home, for you and
right.
I to do this interview virtually rather than being in the same room. Well, guess what that does? That allows people the mobility to live in some of these desirable places. So not only home prices were not, already out of, affordability reach for most people. Well, guess what we did? We threw kerosene on that fire by allowing people to migrate to these desirable places. And so it is truly a trying to solve affordability for housing. And as you and I talked a little before this, it's trying to use, like, it's like a surgeon trying to use a hammer to
Yeah.
conduct surgery. It's the wrong tool in the wrong vehicle.
Well, to me,
That's
it's
not going to
it's
solve the
the
problem.
wrong scapegoat.
Yeah,
Like,
very much so.
I get for sure the new construction. That makes sense. Like, that's not just here in California. We've been talking about that for years, and I've been aware that that's not just a California thing. That's across the nation. But it's funny to me how, like, you have all of these people out there saying, "Hey, affordability, who's to blame?" And it's one thing, and it's short-term rentals. When actually, when you do the numbers, and I was just talking about this because we're dealing right now in California with this SB 584 bill,
Yeah,
which is going to increase taxes from 0% on a state level for short-term rentals, now 15%, which is literally going to destroy most business, which is great if you're staying in, right? Like our 15 properties that we might be able to hold on to might do, 1.5 to 2x the income that they were before because the supply goes down. However, when you look at this and you see, okay, well, what's the reason behind it? To me, the very first thing, like you said, it was probably affordability. So let's look at the numbers. Well, in Fresno, California, where I live, there's 180,000 homes. Guess how many Airbnbs there are? 894. That's 0.5% of the available homes. In San Diego, there's 547,000. Guess how many Airbnbs? There's 10,000. That's only about 1.5%. In LA, there's 1.5 million homes. There's only 12,000 Airbnbs. That's 0.7%. I just did all these numbers literally before we get on this podcast, so they're fresh in my mind. I'm not that smart. I just really just did these numbers. But that's not enough. That's not pointing to short-term rentals and saying you're the problem. That's the wrong scapegoat.
correct. 100% correct. I mean, you nailed it. It is truly a supply demand issue, and we're not even a drop in the bucket in the industry. And a lot of these homes are not going to be utilized for workforce housing, and so it's a much more complex problem that needs to be addressed. And I get it's well intended, but you have to look at the data and have to actually solve this problem. Solve the right problem.
Mhm.
Imposing this, because again, I hate to say feel singled out, but it's like there are second homes that aren't being used,
Yep.
and people who use visit that's occupying inventory too. And it's like,
Yep.
but there doesn't seem to be the same scrutiny on that.
And people are scared of what they don't understand, right? Right, Lucas. So one of the things that cracks me up whenever I see this is like tragedy happens at Airbnb, party happens at Airbnb. It's like, okay, so how many long-term rentals last night was there a tragedy that happened, but that's not part of the title? Like tragedy at long-term rental, party at long-term rental, shooting at long-term rental. No, it's just at a residence, right? But when it's an Airbnb, that makes it into the title. Why? Because people just don't quite understand it. It's still such a new thing. And again, I feel like people always want one group or one person to blame, and they don't want to say that it's new construction because, well, we need new construction. We need to be able to keep that around. Whereas Airbnb, oh, we don't need that. So maybe that'll solve the problem. But when you look at the numbers, that's not the case. So I guess, we're kind of both on a soapbox here. I guess the bigger question is, what do we as an industry do in preparation for these things? If I'm in, let's call it Salt Lake City, that's close to you. Not a lot of regulations over there. I've got a student that's built up a giant portfolio over there. What kind of things in a place that doesn't have a lot of regulations, knowing where the trend of this business and this industry is going, what should they be doing to maybe get out in front of it?
It's not a spectator sport. I mean, it's an investment. It should be part of your business strategy. Get involved early, even like you said, before regulations and when there's regulations, we need to have our voice. And it's kind of one of those, it's really easy to sit on the sidelines and not participate. But guess what? It's everyone's livelihood. And this is an industry that, deserves to play on a big stage. You can see it. The market has spoken. People love this as an option, as an alternative to hotels. And so getting involved with the local associations, the local coalitions, a big part of it. Rallying support of other kind of tangent elements that are impacted. The local realtor associations, with these kind of restrictions, impair home values if they can't sell and transfer a license. And so leveraging that. Corporate housing is another industry that runs in very similar kind of business model. So you think about that, and then the hospitality. Those industries are really important. And we did a study with the University of Colorado, in Summit County about that. Think about the difference of, it's a lot of Denver driving traffic. Well, bars, restaurants, people staying overnight instead of day tripping, that impacts their business. They want people staying up there. That's part of the community. So it's not even just directly us, it's getting people involved. And I say, we should be supportive, collaborative, and bring data and educate. Because I do believe most local politicians are well-intended and want to get to the right solution. And I think, they have people in their ear in different constituent bases. We need to be represented. And so that's why I say, get involved. It's not a spectator sport, and rally the support of others who have a vested interest, because this is important. This is complex. And you just don't want, I'd say one segment, overrepresented or disproportionately steering the discussion into places or the decisions in the wrong direction because they don't understand the full scope of this.
Yep. Well, and I think the key here is equipping those who are listening with the things to be talking about, right? Like the things that come to mind for me is if you're gonna go into these associations, if you're gonna go into state senate, if you're gonna go into these rooms, right? It's the obvious things, right? It's the people will lose jobs, right? We pay out to our contractors, our employees, and our customer service reps every single month close to $20,000. And that's amongst about 6 people, right? And so you're talking about full-time jobs being lost for 6 different families. That's major. Then on top of that, cleaners who are getting paid for every single cleaning. A lot of I don't know about you guys, but a lot of our cleaners, we're their number one client. Yep. And so when you lose your number one client and now 10 businesses, 10 cleaning companies lose their number one client, they're either going to have to go find new business, which if Airbnbs are gone or drastically dropped in that area, they're going to have a tough time finding new business, or they're going to have to start firing people. That's the number one thing to me. What are some other things that people should be talking about?
Well, you're right. It's the economic impact is huge. And a lot of the local coalitions, associations will commission those kind of studies, and they're valuable. You get independent parties to do that. It's not only directly, but then you start to look at the tax base generated for people using, in restaurants, bars, and eating local because they're there. No. Understanding and listening and trying to get to what the problems are. Nuisance is often brought up as the concern. Often that's not. It's again, as we talked about scapegoating, it's used as a vehicle to justify and impose unreasonable, constraints on this. And so it is help educate, understand, but it's also, what are we doing to have workforce? We are having this labor supply issue. That's a much bigger macro issue, but helping, how do we find affordable housing? Because you will see it, and I've seen it in different municipalities where they impose strict STR and then they shoot down, well, we can't have affordable housing here in this neighborhood or that. Yeah. And you're going, well, you just, shot yourself in the foot, because you could have addressed this problem here by, having solutions on the housing. Right. And so it's helped them understand the impact this would really have. and not only to the jobs lost, but the financial impact of building more housing and actually solving the problem rather than pretending to put a Band-Aid on it when it's a gaping wound. And we are not, regulating STRs is not the solution and putting caps on that.
Lukas, I got one more question, and then I want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to share how people can connect with you. And of course, we're going to keep it in our six-figure formula group where we're going live right now to answer some questions, which I'm excited to be able to do for our private members. And for those of you that are not a private member of the six-figure formula, go check it out at fearlesskyle.com/6FF to be able to have access to our guests like Lukas. One other thing that comes to mind for me is the potential of hurting the real estate market if there's too much regulation on this. And I kind of got in my head where I think this might go, but have you thought about that as well? Is that something that you've spoken light over whenever you go into these rooms to talk about, affordability of real estate?
No question. Nice thing is in most places, the Realtor Association is speaking on their behalf, and they understand that impact, because not allowing a home to get a license or a transfer materially impacts it. In some markets, seeing 15-20% difference on home value.
Yeah.
These are already scarce assets, and so you'll probably see less turnover in transactions, because if I have a license, guess what? That's worth a lot more. It's kind of like the taxi cab medallions where they restricted supply, and all of a sudden people paid obscene amounts for this medallion that gave them the right to be a taxi cab. And so I do think, they're actually amplifying some of the other issues, because now we won't have inventory, available and turnover. So I think it will slow up volume, which does hurt the real estate industry. I do think these assets holding on with the license do become more valuable in this time, where I do think we're in these early stages. I do think, we as a group and all of the other, individuals who have a vested interest in this will get everyone to the right, place and make thoughtful regulation. But it's going to take some time, and we might have a few years of some aches and pains as we go through it.
Well, and one of the things I think of, which you just had a really good point on, the value of a license. I also think about, for example, this bill that California is trying to pass to increase to 15% for taxes. Well, my gut feeling is, of the 900 Airbnbs in Fresno, California, and keep up with me on these numbers here, we have at any given time in Fresno only about 2 months worth of inventory for properties for sale in Fresno, which comes out to be about 400 to 500 homes for sale at any given point. Well, if 900 Airbnbs are now taxed at 15%, I think about 25% of them might actually say, well, I'm making enough money, I'm going to stay. And then the other 75%, there's going to be a split of some people that say, well, I'll do a long-term rental. And then the other side that says, I don't want to deal with a long-term rental, I'm just going to sell it. Suddenly, about 40%, that's what, 350 more properties put on the market for sale compared to the usual 500. That's a 60-70% increase in inventory, which means that, especially where rates are right now, demand is not going to keep up with that. And so for that reason, you suddenly have a house that was selling for 400,000 and now people are having to settle for 325, 350. I think it could absolutely destroy a real estate market.
Oh, it could. And just to build on that, because I think you bring up a great point there. It also, what are we doing to those individuals who like consuming this product and see it as a superior alternative? If all of that inventory ends up, washing out, well, guess what? This doesn't become accessible, because the average nightly rate has to go up because there's not enough supply.
Yeah.
And then imposing that taxes, right? Guess who's going to pay for it? It's the guest, and everything gets kind of marked up. And they're taxing, especially in that California one, which I'm familiar with, they're taxing it almost like it's commercial property. Right. And so I'm taxing it like a commercial property, but I'm not doing that the long term. And guess what I'm not going to let you do? I'm not going to let you sell food or alcohol or do other ways. Like, it's because it's commercial property. So I say that half in jest, but there is some truth of they're treating that asset like a commercial property and not giving you the ability to really treat it fully like a commercial property.
Yeah. Awesome. Lukas, how can people connect with you? How can they learn more about SkyRun? Where can they go?
Yeah, skyrun.com is probably the easiest place. I'm open book. I'm here to help. So, I'll give out my personal email. It's easy enough. It's Lukas, Lukas at skyrun.com. So happy to, if I can be assistance or Skyrun can be of assistance, happy to field that and support.
Yeah.
Any
Key
questions?
there, Lucas with a K, not a C. So
Yep.
get that
Spell it the
right.
weird way.
One more question here, Lucas. You said that people need to get involved. It's not a spectator sport. Give me one actionable item. How do I get connected with one of those? Is there a website? Is there something I should Google? What's the number one thing for me to go and start trying to find these places?
Yeah, Verma is a great place because they have what other local associations and the directories for that. And a lot of municipalities have them. And if they don't, guess what? Reach out to Verma and they'll help you with getting it started.
And that's VRMA, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Lucas, thank you so much for joining us here on the Fearless Investor Podcast and helping our audience to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We're going to keep it live here now in the six-figure formula to answer additional questions from our group. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you, Kyle.
All right, one more time on that website, strsecrets.com/VA. Pretty simple. You can go ahead and sign up there and get an onboarding call and a consultation call with Mike's team, see if it's a good fit for you. Overall, though, what I want to just encourage you guys today is just go for it, but have those 7 steps set up beforehand. That was the biggest thing. I didn't have it set up exactly like what Mike said with those 7 steps, but when I look back at it, that was the difference. Those things that I did before bringing on VAs, that was the difference between having successful VAs and non-successful VAs. When I didn't do the time study, when I didn't have the company manual, I wasn't documenting systems, I wasn't doing an onboarding call or onboarding process with them. When I didn't have all that, that's when VAs came on and they left just as quickly. When I did do those things beforehand, that's where we now had successful hires, successful onboarding processes, successful VAs staying with our business for the long term. So do those things first and then move over to finding the VA. That's the biggest recommendation I have for you. That's going to do it here today on the Fearless Investor Podcast. We're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We'll see you next time.